Welcome to Game Fondue Reviews. In this video, we're going to take a look at Pandemic. Pandemic is a cooperative game where all players are actually on the same team trying to save the world from the spread of various diseases. Let's jump right in with the description of the rules, see a few example turns being played, and I'll be back for some closing remarks.
This is Pandemic set up for a two-player game. To set it up, you put one research station in Atlanta, and then you shuffle up the roll cards and you deal one to each player, and each player takes the corresponding color pawn and puts it in Atlanta as well. You always start in Atlanta because that's where the center of disease control is located. The infection marker is put on the first space of the infection track, which is actually a 2, and the outbreak marker is put on the 0 space of the outbreak track. You just kind of lay out the different cure vials. They're usually not on the board, but this just makes it easier to see, so we're putting them here. And then the rest of the research stations and all the diseases and all the different colors form a supply. You actually shuffle the deck of cards and deal each player a hand. Depending on the number of players, they're going to get a different number of cards. In 2 players, it's 4. In 3 players, it's 3. And in a 4-player game, it's 2 each. So we're 2 players, so it's a hand of 4. And then the way you're going to start the diseases on the board is you're going to shuffle up the infection deck and draw out 3 cards. And you'll see Bangkok, Essen, and Milan were the first 3. So that's why these each have 3 cubes of their color on them. And the next 3 get 2 cubes each, and the last 3 get 1 cube each. And then these cards go right here. Lastly, to set up, you decide how difficult you want the game to be, and depending on the level, you put that many epidemics in. The introductory game is 4, and that's really for the first time you ever play. The normal game would be 5 epidemics, and the heroic or more difficult game will be 6. We've already divided out into 6 piles, so we put one of these into each of these stacks, and then we're going to shuffle them in, and we're going to put the stacks on top of each other, one above the other, to make one single draw stack. And after that's done, we'll go through the different actions you take on your turn. So during a turn, players first take 4 actions, and then they're going to draw 2 cards. And then there is a hand limit of 7 cards that they have to be aware of at all times. And lastly, they're going to draw infection cards and put more cubes out on the board. After a player's turn, play proceeds left. And because this is a fully cooperative game, the players are either going to win collectively if they find the cure for all 4 different diseases, or they're going to lose collectively if they need to put 1 cube of any of these colors on the board, but that pile is out, or if they reach 8 outbreaks, or during their draw phase of their turn, they draw and there's not enough cards for them to draw both cards. So there's 3 ways to lose, but only 1 way to win. So let's move ahead to the action phase. So players are going to take 4 actions in their turn, and they can do them in any order. The most basic actions I like to refer to as movement actions because that's exactly what they are. They're all moving. So the first is called drive, and that just means you move for 1 action to an adjacent space. You could take multiple drive actions in a turn, just continuing to move for 1 action each. It is important to note that the places on the edge of the map do connect with the other side. So for example, as 1 move, you can go from San Francisco to Tokyo. Also, there's direct flights, and the way direct flights work is you discard a card from your hand. Like for example, if I had Mexico City in my hand, I discard it and I just fly right to Mexico City. That's pretty close for a direct flight, but you can certainly do so. And next is a charter flight. Very similar idea, except you discard the location that you're in. So I'm in Mexico City now. I discard Mexico City to the discard pile, and I can fly anywhere I want. So maybe I want to go in the middle into Baghdad over here. So next is a shuttle flight, and the way a shuttle flight works is if you're in a place with a research station, you can, as 1 action, move to another place that contains a research station. You can only do that if you're starting and ending in a place with a research station, however. Now, there's some other actions you can take on a turn that are a little more involved, and they don't necessarily have to do with moving. The first is to build a research station. And now you have to be in a location, so again, let's use Mexico City as an example because I know I have that card around here. So if you're in Mexico City, you can discard the Mexico City card, and then you build a research station there. You have to be in there, and you have to have the card, and you discard it to build a station there. Next is to discover a cure. And in order to discover a cure, you have to be in a location with a research station. So let's put one of these right here in Baghdad for this guy here. To discover a cure, you discard 5 cards of the same color. So if you want to find the blue cure, you have to have 5 blue cards in your hand and be somewhere with a research station. You discard them, and then you've covered this place with the marker. The scientist has the advantage of only having to discard 4 cards of the same color, which can be very helpful. And remember, once all 4 diseases are cured, you win the game. You don't actually have to remove all the cubes off of the board. But that brings us to treat disease. And what treat disease does is for each action, you remove 1 cube. So you can multiple treat, but each one is an action in itself. However, if a disease is cured, let's say the red disease is cured and you're over here, for one action, you get to remove all of the red. And when you remove them, they just go back to the supply, and they might come back to the board again later, but it helps you from running out of them, which will make you lose. Now, if a disease is cured and then all the cubes of that color are removed from the board, has to be cured, you can flip this over to the sunset side. And what that does is it eradicates the disease. So even if a red card was to come up in this deck later on in the game, you wouldn't actually place out any more diseases. And we'll understand that a little better in a moment. Also, the medic has the ability that he can remove all of the cubes in one area as one treat disease action. That's his special ability. And lastly is share knowledge. And in order to share knowledge, players have to be in the same location. So in this case, they're both in Mexico City, and they can transfer. As your action, you can either give or receive this card, but you have to transfer the location of the place that you're in together. So they'd only be able to give back and forth Mexico City to each other. But it's very important to coordinate your movements, and you might be able to share cards in that way. But remember, that 7-card hand limit is always in effect. So if you share knowledge with somebody that puts their hand count above 7, they're immediately going to have to discard down to 7. So after a player finishes taking up to 4 actions, the next part of the turn is to draw 2 cards. So they draw 2 cards, and any epidemics among them get immediately resolved. But before we go through the epidemic, I do want to remind you that 7-card limit is in effect. But if you draw some special event cards like we have here, these can be played at any time, even prior to having to discard cards, or even during another player's turn. And they all have special abilities that don't cost an action, but you can use them whenever you want. But you go over 7 and you don't have those, you're going to have to discard some cards. Also, epidemics don't count against your hand. But when an epidemic comes out, you follow the instructions on the card, and it's always the same. First thing you do is you increase this here. For the first couple, it stays at 2, but it's going to get up a little bit higher. And then you infect, and this is very, very bad. So you draw the bottom card of the deck, and wherever it is, it happens to be Atlanta, gets 3 cubes in its color. So Atlanta would get 3 blue cubes on it, and then you take the discard pile, shuffle it all together, and put it back on top of the deck. So you're going to see these places that are already infected tend to continue to get even more infected. So after the epidemic resolves, you just put it in the discard pile like so. After finishing your draw phase, you move on to the infector phase. To do that, you draw as many cards as this currently is. So right now it's at 2. So we would draw Milan, and that's going to explain something else we're going to do in a second. Each place you draw is going to get 1 cube on it. Ooh, this would have been a really bad turn. But that brings us to the next thing, which is outbreaks. So sometimes a place already has 3 cubes on it. 3 is the maximum in one color, although it's possible if there was, say, 3 cubes here and then a blue cube, you could still take more blue because it can have 3 of each color. But if you draw a card or a card gets infected in any way, even from the epidemic itself, adding 3 to it, you get an outbreak because it can never go above it. And what happens is instead of placing in that place, you go up 1 on the outbreak marker, and you put a same color cube in each adjacent region. So this would get a blue, this would get a blue, and unfortunately, this is already full as well. So you're going to outbreak again. You're having a chain reaction. So each adjacent place to that gets a blue. Fortunately, you can only outbreak once in each chain reaction, or these would infinitely go back and forth. So nothing happens there, but that was 2 outbreaks. That was a very rough turn for the players. And now you see there's lots of more blue cubes out on the board that they need to be mindful of. And remember, if at any time you can't put out a cube you need to put out in any color, you lose, or if these outbreaks get up to 8. So after the infector phase, the next player starts their turn, and the game continues like this until either the players win collectively by finding all 4 cures, or the players lose as a team. And remember, there's 3 ways to lose: outbreaks, cubes, and cards. But only one way to win. That's cures. Let's get going with this example playthrough. So remember, the first thing we do is we flip 3 cards, and each of those places is going to get 3 cubes in their corresponding colors. So then we draw 3 more, and each of those places is going to get 2. And lastly, 3 more cards, each getting 1. The deck has already been shuffled, and the players have their cards. There's lots of epidemics in there. So let's get going. We're going to start with this player, and the first thing he gets to do is to take his 4 actions. For his first action, he's going to move 1. Then he's going to move 2, and because he's the medic, he can take all of these as 1 action, so that's 3. And for his last action, he's going to fly to Delhi. So that makes 4, and he finishes his turn over here. And then he draws 2 cards for the next part of his turn. Hopefully no epidemics, and he didn't get any, but he got 2 blue cards here. And technically players aren't supposed to show their cards to each other, but they can talk freely about them, so it's a little strange. And then the last part of his turn is the infector, so he draws 2, so he gets Paris and Essen. Lots of blue in that area, so he puts 1 cube in their color on each of those, and then it goes to the other player's turn. He really wants to get some cubes out of St. Petersburg because he's afraid it's going to outbreak, so he has this special event card. It costs no actions, but allows him to put a research station anywhere. So he's going to stick one right there in St. Petersburg, and then he's going to use his first action to move between research stations. So that's 1, 2, 3, and 4. He's going to totally clean it off. And now he draws 2 cards. Unfortunately, one of them is an epidemic, so we resolve the epidemic immediately. Gets put in the discard pile. We increase this. Mexico City is going to take 3 cubes on it. Then we shuffle these up, and we're going to put them on top of the deck and then go to the infection phase. Before allowing the infection to take place, this player is going to play this other card he has, which allows him to examine the top 6 cards of the draw pile and rearrange them in the order of his choice. So he's going to look at those 6 and put them back in a more favorable order. He really doesn't want Mexico City to come up because it already has 3, so that's going to be towards the bottom. He doesn't mind St. Petersburg because he just cleaned it off. San Francisco is clean as well. And Milan and Shanghai aren't bad either. So he's going to put these back in this order and stick them on top of the deck. Now the infector phase happens and he draws 2. So he got St. Petersburg and San Francisco. So each of them takes a cube and it moves back to the other player's turn. It's really that simple. We're going to jump ahead to near the end of the game. It's now the white player's turn. So first he's going to play the Shanghai card to fly there as 1. Then he's going to walk to the research station for 2. Because he's the scientist, he only has to discard 4 cards of the same color. So that's 4 red as his third action. And the players have won the game and saved the world because they've discovered all 4 cures. Ends immediately. Great job.
I'll admit, I don't play a lot of base game Pandemic these days because it has some expansions that are absolutely phenomenal. But it's still a fun game and it's still a good one. One of the first things I noticed about Pandemic is when introducing it to new players, they immediately understand, relate to, and get into the theme. It makes perfect sense. It's fun to be doctors trying to save the world, and it really ties in well with the cooperative nature of this game. I can't imagine a better theme for a game where you're working together, and it does that very well. It plays very smoothly, and it's pretty easy to understand, so it makes for a real good, fun experience. I strongly recommend this one to families or other people that are gaming in more of a social setting. It's not competitive in any way because you either succeed together or you fail together. So it works as a good team building or a family exercise. So if this one looks fun to you, or if you haven't ever tried it, I have to strongly recommend you do so. That's Pandemic. Thanks for watching.